Hi, this is Mark Stewart. Welcome back to my series of videos on the long-term effects of bullying and how it can affect you and other adults years or even decades after you leave the bullying behind. This is also a promotion for my book, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Names Will Hurt Me, Healing for Victims of Bullying. I'm covering kind of the highlights of the book. I can't hit all of it in these videos, but I want to touch on the highlights. In the first section of the book, I talked about the overall long-term effects of bullying. I introduced some statistics about what these adults deal with, you or maybe someone else you know, and what I dealt with. And then the second chapter, I talked about my story. In my second video, I also talked about my story, what I endured at the hands of the bullies, and why it affected me and how it affected me as an adult. In the second section, I dealt with 4 personas that show up in people's lives. First is the underachiever, then the overachiever, the people pleaser, and the punisher. And I did a video on 2 of those and then a video on the other 2. And the last video, I introduced the idea that I'm using for healing and as a metaphor called the ultimate road trip, because life is an ultimate road trip. And I talked about the 4 sections of that we're going to cover in detail. But the first part of that is unpacking the car. In the last video, I talked about the basic idea of beginning to make peace with your past and understanding that what you went through in your past has affected who you are now and might even be causing you some pain and might be causing you issues, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, anger, bitterness. These are typical for people who were bullied that they struggle with as adults, and you might be struggling with that. And at the end of that, I talked about the idea that you might need a catalyst in order to implement change in your life. Something that spurs you on, something that makes you realize that staying where you're at is more painful than going for healing. Because it's too easy to stay where you're at. Even if it's painful, it's comfortable, and change is hard. You have to come to a place where staying where you are is more painful than taking the time to begin to heal. And that's not as easy as it sounds. It's a hard decision to really make and mean it. And then you also sometimes need a catalyst or something that boosts you and helps you get there. So, again, it's got to be too painful to stay where you're at. But now I'm also going to spend a little bit of time talking about my catalyst and what began my change. And I want to not necessarily tell you that I'm endorsing any particular religion, but I am going to tell you it was a religious experience that helped get my attention and helped me get started on the road to healing. And I still believe that God helped me and helps me now with dealing with life and helping me to have a better life. But I'm not telling you that you need a particular religious experience. This is simply my story. And I'm hoping it will resonate with you and connect with you. First of all, at the age of 24, I had really made a mess of my life. I flunked out of college. I went into the Air Force, and during basic training, near the end of basic training, I pulled a muscle in my back. I had to spend some time in what they call casual, which is where you basically sit out when you're injured, and I was there long enough they gave me a choice. Either go back to day 1 and start all over with basic training, or leave the military on a medical discharge and go home. I didn't feel like I was fitting in there. Shoot, I never fit in anywhere at the time. So I went home, but that felt like another failure. And then my parents and I didn't get along well because I would never seem to finish anything I started, and I ended up moving out. I didn't have much money. I got a job at Kmart during seasonal, it was Christmas season. I got a job there. And then I moved into a 1-room place. It was a house where the owners rented out rooms to men. It was men only because we all shared a bathroom. There was no kitchen. I had to go just get something to eat. But it was weekly rent, and it was cheap. And I was doing okay, at least surviving, although I was racking up credit card debt because I couldn't afford to really do much better on what I was bringing in, working part-time. When I got laid off because it was a seasonal job, and now I'm running out of money. I'm about to be kicked out because I don't waste time at that little place. I'm a couple of weeks without rent, and I'm gone. I don't even have money for rent or food within about a week or 2. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? And I finally just decided I've had enough. I'm going to end this. I'm going to do the world a favor and I'm going to leave. I'm going to check out. I went to the doctor, spent a good portion of what little money I had left. I got a prescription for sleeping pills. Didn't tell the doctor because I just told the doctor I was having trouble sleeping. That was not a lie. I could do it straight face because I couldn't sleep at night. But I was going to take that whole bottle of sleeping pills and just check out. I was going to be done. All I could think about was the sweet peace that was going to bring. And I was desperately trying to figure out how to let my parents know it wasn't their fault. And I wrote them a letter to let them know what I'd went through and why I was struggling so much. But I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anybody. Like most people that are really going to commit suicide, I didn't tell anybody. It was just kept to myself. I did still have a phone, but the phone was about to be cut off. And I decided, hey, I might as well check my voicemail. I checked my messages, and there's a message from one of my parents' friends asking me to go to church the next night. I still don't know why, but for some reason the thought came to my head, what difference will one day make? And I said yes. And I rode with them because I didn't even have reliable transportation. We get to the church and we walked in the door and they were just starting to sing, and I found a place at the back of the church and I'm sitting there mouthing the words. I grew up around church, in and out of it, and I knew enough to know the words. So I just mouthed the words and nobody knew that I was hurting or that I was going to commit suicide. Nobody knew a thing. I could smile and fake it. But inside I was just thinking about, it's over. Shortly after the first song, as they were starting the second song, this thought came in my head and it just would not leave. I tried to push it away, and the more I tried to push it away, the more it just kept churning and churning. And that thought was, you've tried everything else and it's all failed. Give me a chance. It was such a strange thought. I'm like, where is this coming from? And I kept trying to get it out of my head and think of something else, and it would come back again. And I'm having this internal battle trying to just think of something different when I realized the music has stopped. And I looked up to the front of the church, and the pastor has stopped the singing between two songs. He just stopped the singing. And he looked up at me and everybody else in that congregation, but it felt like he's looking right at me. And he said, I don't understand this. I just have something, I feel like God is talking to somebody. And he's saying, you've tried everything else and it's all failed. Nothing's worked. Give him a chance. I just froze. I mean, it just felt like those words just penetrated through me. And even despite my social anxiety, I got up out of that pew because he said, the altar's open. If you need prayer, come forward. And despite my social anxiety, I got up out of that pew and I started walking forward, and I was shaking. See, I hadn't cried in years. The anger was so hard, and it hardened me so much that I couldn't seem to deal with the other emotions, the low self-esteem and the voices that were telling me I was worthless. They called me sewage, and I felt like sewage. But it was buried so deep that I just couldn't express it in tears. I wanted to cry because I knew if you cry, you release things and it feels better, but I couldn't do it. All I could do was scream in anger, and I was very good at expressing anger. But as I was walking up towards that altar, my legs are shaking, my whole body is shaking, and I feel tears welling up. And as somebody started to ask me what I was there to pray about, I pretty much collapsed on my knees at that altar, and tears started flowing. I don't know how long I was there. All I know is when I woke up, or not woke up, when I lifted my head up, my shirt is soaked in tears. I lift my head up and somebody hands me a box of Kleenex. And they were just praying for me, and one of the men lifted me to my feet or helped me to my feet. And I went back to my pew, and I didn't understand what happened. All I knew was I felt lighter. And I felt like maybe there's a chance for something better. I didn't understand. I just knew that I felt so much lighter, and the release from the tears. And I didn't decide I was not going to commit suicide at all, but I wasn't going to do it that night. And then the next day, I got a phone call from someone that said, there's a local factory that's hiring. And all you have to do is go to this temp agency, put in an application, and you will have a job now. And they weren't kidding. I went and put in an application, got an interview, and I was working less than a week later. It wasn't great pay, but it was enough that I could continue to live. I could continue to pay the rent that little place, and I could eat. And even start paying off some of the credit card debt that I had racked up. And then my parents heard from someone that my attitude had changed, and they told me that I could come back home and try and get back on my feet. And it was humbling, but I decided to take it as a new start. And I'm still churning. I still got all this mess in my head, but I just had this weird feeling that there was hope. And I was going to hold on to that hope with everything I had. And it was a 45-minute drive to and from that factory to my parents' home, each way. And I didn't have much money, but I knew there had to be a better way of living. I just wasn't sure what it was. But I knew I didn't want to live the way I was anymore. I got my library card. The library had some great audio books and some actual print books from authors like Dale Carnegie, Tony Robbins, Joyce Meyer, Joel Osteen, and several others. And I listened to those, and I learned better ways of living. And slowly I began to realize that I could have better. And just as I'm really starting to get the hang of the fact that I might be able to live better, the factory closed its doors. And I'm like, now what? And then they said, well, because they closed the doors and moved the factory to Mexico, you can get some money to help go back to school. And I went back to school. This time I went back to college not because I wanted to make money and rub it in the faces of the bullies, but because I wanted to for me. And I went as an English major because that's what I loved, was writing. And I did very well. Eventually finished my bachelor's degree, got a job at the university, and that gave me some tuition benefits, and I was able to finish a master's degree. And now I've got a wonderful life. But it took a lot of time and a lot of work to get past the way I thought. I had to change my way of thinking. I had to reprogram that GPS to point me in a better direction. I had to learn how to live because I didn't know how to live. All I knew how to do was survive. And I'm telling you that you can have better. You can have better ways of living. You can have a better life. If you are thinking about committing suicide, if you're there, call right now. There are suicide hotlines out there. There are priests, rabbis, preachers, you name it, counselors that work through public health agencies. There are people that will help you. Go get help. If it's just a friend or a family member, don't stay silent. Go get help. Because I'm telling you that you are special. That no matter what the bullies told you, you have talents and abilities that nobody else has, and you can reach people that nobody else can. I now teach classes at several universities I've taught off and on for years as an adjunct instructor. And I love teaching. I've also had the chance to teach private photography classes and to speak to people about better ways of living. And I've been able to help people that nobody else could because of my story. You're the same way. You can help people that I can't. You can use what you went through to help others. You can move past it. Please get help. And if you're thinking that you're to that bottom, you've hit that bottom and you need change, let this video be a catalyst for that change. Today, make a decision that you aren't going to live that way anymore. And watch the rest of these videos. If you can, buy the book. It's coming out in a couple weeks. It'll be on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBook. It'll be in electronic and paper format. Get a copy of it. Read it. Use those techniques. But also maybe get some help from a counselor. You might need additional help. It's okay to get help. There were a lot of people who helped me. But you can have better. Let this be a catalyst for change in your life. Watch the next video as I begin to talk even more about the idea of unpacking the car and getting rid of the baggage. Deep cleaning so that you can have room for good things in your life by getting rid of the crap. You can have better. Thank you for watching this video.